On the morning of my 42nd birthday, I was sitting alone in a corner of the Sunrise Café, with a whole chocolate cake in front of me and not a single candle lit, wondering very seriously if my life was even worth continuing. And that is not an exaggeration. 12 years of building a billion-dollar company, sleepless nights, boardrooms, headlines calling me a visionary. And in one morning it all got stripped down to something raw and ugly I did not recognize anymore. Then this little girl I had never seen in my life walked up to my table, stared me dead in the eyes and said, "Are you okay, sir?" And that question, those four tiny words, changed everything. A couple of hours before that, I was in my penthouse with my phone lighting up for all the wrong reasons. The first hit was an email from my business partner, Trevor, the guy I started Coal Industries with when we were just two idiots in a tiny office. And that email was the official notice of a hostile takeover. He had sold his shares to our biggest competitor for a fat percentage and a board seat. The lawyers promised me I would keep majority control, but when you see your best friend sign your company away like that, it does not feel like a legal issue. It feels like a knife you did not see coming. Then right on cue, my phone buzzed again, a text from Rebecca, my fiancée of 2 years, the woman I thought I was going to grow old with, and it said, "I have been with Trevor for 6 months. I am with him now. Your credit cards are on your desk. Do not contact me." Just like that. No apology, no explanation, no "this is hard" message, just a clean break like canceling a subscription. And because the universe likes to commit to a theme, the next and only thing my sister sent that morning was, "Can you wire me $50K for my new venture? It is time sensitive. No happy birthday. No how are you holding up. Just a bill with a family label on it. And you know what I mean, right when you realize most of the people around you do not actually see you. They just see what you can provide." So by 9 in the morning, I was in that cafe, wrinkled dress shirt, eyes red from a night. I definitely did not sleep, my phone sitting on the table like a dead rock. And the barista slid this perfect cake in front of me, because I had ordered it weeks ago, thinking I would be celebrating with my fiancé and staff. And suddenly the whole thing felt ridiculous, like a prop in a life that did not fit me anymore. I remember thinking, if I just disappeared right now, the stock market might wobble, but would anyone actually miss me, or would they just panic about their bonuses? I was staring at that cake when I heard the tiniest little voice, "Sir, are you okay?" And I looked up and saw this girl, maybe 7, brown skin, bright eyes, hair pulled into 2 puffs with beads that clicked when she moved, holding a stuffed rabbit like a security badge. And she was looking at me with this serious, honest concern that almost hurt to see. I blinked and managed, "What?" And she shrugged like this was the most obvious observation in the world and said, "You look sad. My mom says when people look sad, we should check on them. Are you okay?" And for a second, I literally could not speak, because no one had asked me that in a long time without wanting something in return. Before I could answer, her mom hurried over a little out of breath, saying, "Baby, you cannot just walk up to people like that." Then she turned to me apologizing. "I am so sorry, my daughter has a big heart and kind of forgets about personal space." And I looked up at her and felt something shift in my chest, because she was beautiful, but not in that polished, curated way I was used to. She had on a bright red coat over jeans and a white shirt, her natural hair in a bun, no obvious designer labels, just this tired but genuine warmth in her eyes. I surprised myself by smiling, a real smile I had not felt in weeks, and saying, "It is okay, she is right, I am sad." And the girl nodded, like she had just won a case in court. "I knew it. Do you want to talk about it? Talking helps, my mommy says so." And her mom said her name, Destiny. A little warning in her voice, but there was affection there too. She started to pull her away, still apologizing. "We will leave you alone. I am sorry she bothered you." And something in me panicked, because the idea of going back to just me and that cake and my thoughts felt heavier than I could handle. "No," I said too fast, then softer. "Please, you are not bothering me at all, honestly. I could use the company, and there is way too much cake here for one person." Destiny's eyes went huge. "It is your birthday." And when I nodded, she looked personally offended on my behalf. "And you are alone. That is the saddest thing ever." And I actually laughed like a real laugh from somewhere deep that had not been used in a while. Yeah, that happened. Her mom hesitated studying me, and whatever she saw there must have seemed safe enough, because she finally sighed and said, "Okay, but just for a little while." Then she stuck out her hand and said, "I am Simone. This nosy one is Destiny." And I shook her hand and said, Adrian Cole." And for once, my last name did not feel like a brand or a headline. It just felt like a person introducing himself to two strangers at a cafe table on a day he really needed it. We shared that cake, the three of us crowding around a table meant for two, Destiny talking a mile a minute about school and her upcoming play, where she was tree number 2 and had 3 lines. She was extremely proud of Simone, watching her with that mix of pride and quiet worry. Single parents wear like a second skin, and me, the guy who supposedly had everything, sitting there realizing this might be the best birthday I had had in years. And it was with two people who only knew me as the tired man with the cake, not as the CEO or the bank account. After they finally left, Destiny hugged me like we had been friends forever and said, "Thank you for sharing your birthday with us." And I said, "Thank you for noticing I needed a friend," with my voice catching more than I wanted to admit. I stayed at that table for another hour, giving cake to a family at the next table, when I overheard it was their son's birthday too, tipping the barista like he had saved my life, and sitting there with this strange new feeling in my chest that I eventually realized was hope. I kept thinking about that question, "Are you okay, sir?" And the honest answer was no, I was not okay. I had not been okay for a long time. I had just been too busy being successful to notice I was falling apart inside. The next Sunday, I went back to the Sunrise Café, and I told myself it was because the coffee was good, and I needed somewhere quiet to think. But deep down, I knew exactly why I was there. I was hoping to see them again, and when the door opened around 9:15, and Destiny bounded in wearing a blue dress, followed by Simone in a green coat, my heart did this weird little flip in my chest that I did not recognize at the time. Destiny spotted me first. "Mr. Cole, you came back," she yelled like we had planned it. And Simone gave me this surprised but genuine smile, and I heard myself say, "If you will let me, I would love to buy you both breakfast. Consider it a continuation of my birthday celebration." And you could see Simone doing the math in her head, pride on one side, overdue bills on the other, and finally she nodded slowly. "Okay, thank you, that is very kind." And we ended up spending the entire morning together. Over bacon and pancakes, I learned that Simone worked at a flower shop during the week and did bookkeeping for small businesses in the evenings, that Destiny was in 2nd grade and wanted to be a teacher one day, that they lived in a small apartment in the Riverside neighborhood, and that this cafe was their Sunday after church treat when they could afford it. And at one point, Destiny said something about, "My dad used to say that." And I watched Simone's face change this shadow, passing over her features, and later in the park, while Destiny tried to swing herself into space and we sat on a bench. I asked gently about it, and Simone told me about James, her husband, how he got a cancer diagnosis, and 6 months later she was a widow with a 4-year-old and medical debt, how she dropped out of nursing school to care for him and never went back because life just kept happening. Listening to her, I realized we were both grieving, just different kinds of loss, mine dressed up in suits and contracts, hers in hospitals and overdue rent notices. A week later, after another Sunday breakfast, I could not hold it in anymore, watching her count cash twice before paying at the counter, watching her check bus times on her phone because her car had broken down, and I finally asked, "Can I ask you something kind of blunt? Are you okay financially?" And I felt her whole body go tense as she said, "We are fine," too quickly, and I held up my hands. "I am not trying to offend you. I just... Look, last week your daughter walked up to a stranger who looked like he was about to fall apart and asked if he was okay, and that simple act probably saved my life. I was in a very dark place that morning, and she pulled me out of it without even knowing, so if there is anything you need, let me at least try to return the favor, not as charity as gratitude." I watched the war in her eyes, pride versus reality, and finally she exhaled and said quietly, "My rent is due on Thursday. I am about 400 short. I will have it eventually, but the late fees..." And she shook her head. "I cannot believe I am telling you this." And I took out my wallet, counted out 500 in cash, and held it out. "Please let me cover it, and if it makes it easier, think of it this way. You and Destiny gave me the best birthday I have had in years. Let me pay for that birthday breakfast a little late." Her hand trembled when she took the money, eyes glassy as she whispered, "Thank you. You have no idea what this means." And I told her I think I do. That was the first time I realized giving did more for me than spending ever had, because walking back to my apartment that day, instead of feeling heavy and numb, I actually felt like a human being. Little by little, my whole life started to tilt in a different direction. I still had to show up at the office and deal with lawyers and board meetings and Trevor's mess. But now when I sat in those glass conference rooms, I did not just see numbers on screens. I saw 5,000 paychecks, 5,000 destinies and Simones on the other side of every decision. And one morning I called my executive team into a meeting, and instead of talking about aggressive expansion and market share, I started talking about childcare support and mental health resources and flexible schedules. And a couple of the guys looked at me like I had grown a second head. But I held my ground because for the first time in my life, I cared more about the people who worked for me than the reports I showed the board. And if that made me soft in their eyes, so be it. Sundays at the Sunrise Café turned into rituals. I would walk in, and Destiny would barrel across the room yelling my name. Simone would shake her head, but smile. We would share breakfast, talk about Destiny's week, her school play where she stood on a chair in the cafe one morning and loudly rehearsed. "I am the oldest tree in the forest. I have seen many seasons. I will stand strong through the storm," making half the customers laugh and the other half roll their eyes. And somewhere in there we became friends, real ones, the kind where you see each other tired and stressed and still show up. I learned that Simone still dreamed about finishing her nursing degree, but had no idea how she would ever afford it. And I went back to the office and told my HR director to set up a scholarship program for employees and community partners. "Anonymous donor," I said, trying not to grin. And when Simone got the email weeks later saying her entire nursing program was covered tuition books fees, she called me crying so hard I could barely understand her. And all I could say was, "You are going to be an incredible nurse. You should not have to spend 5 years saving for the chance." And she said quietly, "I hope you know I do not care about you. Because of this, Adrian, I fell for you when you were just the sad man sharing cake with us." And I think that is the moment I realized I was in love with her too. It did not hit like lightning. It came in small moments, spaghetti at her tiny kitchen table, Destiny insisting I taste her knock-knock joke, and making no sense helping with second-grade homework, and realizing fractions are apparently my weakness, tucking Destiny into bed when Simone's back hurt, and hearing that little girl whisper, "I am glad you are here, Mr. Cole. Do you think you will keep coming back?" Some of Mom's friends stop coming, and promising, really truly promising, I am not going anywhere, and meaning it so deeply it scared me. One night after dinner, we were cleaning up together, and the TV was on low in the background, and Simone wiped her hands on a dish towel and said, "You have done so much for us, too much, honestly. But the thing I am most grateful for is not the rent help, or the car, or the scholarship. It is your time, your attention, the way you show up for Destiny. That is what she needed. That is what I needed." And I took a breath and told her I was the loneliest man alive before I walked into that cafe. I had everything and nothing, and now I have you and Destiny, and suddenly everything feels like it matters. I know this is fast and complicated, but I am falling in love with you. And she put her hand on my face and said, "It scares me, but I feel it too." And when we kissed, it did not feel dramatic or cinematic. It felt like finally coming home. The big twist, the part where the past walks in and tests everything, happened one quiet afternoon back at the Sunrise Café. Simone and I were at our usual table, Destiny at school. We were sharing a muffin and laughing about something Destiny had said, when the door opened and in walked Rebecca and Trevor like a nightmare in expensive shoes, and I felt my stomach drop. They saw us immediately, of course, and came over, Rebecca leading with that fake sweet voice she used on investors. "Adrian, fancy seeing you here. This is a bit of a downgrade from your usual spots as the Penthouse Cafe closed." And I stood up slightly in front of Simone, without even thinking, and said, "Rebecca, Trevor, I would say it is nice to see you, but I was raised not to lie." And Trevor smirked and went straight for the jugular. "Still bitter about the deal, Cole, you should really thank me. That company was stagnating. We are taking it places you never imagined." And I just looked at him and said, "You mean you are running it into the ground with aggressive tactics and no regard for the people who work there? I have seen the reports. Employee satisfaction down, clients leaving. But sure, tell yourself you are a genius." And Rebecca's eyes slid to Simone like she was a piece of furniture that did not match. "And you are?" she asked, all sharp edges, and Simone met her gaze calmly and said, "I'm Simone, Adrian's girlfriend." And Rebecca let out a little laugh and said, "Of course, let me guess. Aspiring actress, influencer, single mom with big dreams. How convenient to land a billionaire savior." And before I could react, Simone said very evenly, "I work at a flower shop. I am in school to be a nurse. Yes, I am a single mom. None of that is anything to be ashamed of. And the only convenient thing here is that your bad decisions pushed Adrian into a cafe where my daughter noticed he was hurting." Rebecca's smile tightened. "You really think this is going to last?" She said to me, "Playing house with someone like her, you will get bored, men like you always do." And I heard my own voice come out surprisingly calm. "The only people who used me for my money and status are standing right in front of me." I said, "Simone and Destiny saw a man who looked sad and asked if he was okay. That is more real than anything I had with you." And it felt like closing a door I had been afraid to touch. Right then, Destiny came bursting in with her backpack, Rachel, Simone's sister, behind her. Destiny ran up to us, stopped when she saw Rebecca and Trevor, and asked, "Who are they?" And I said, "No one important, sweetheart." And Rebecca actually scoffed. "This is rich, you playing dad to someone else's kid. How long until you get tired of that, Adrian?" And Destiny frowned and said in that blunt way kids have, "That is a mean thing to say." Then looked at us and said, "Can we go? These people are making me uncomfortable." And that was it for me. I put money on the table, looked at Rebecca and Trevor and said, "I used to think you two destroyed my life, but actually, you set me free. If you had not betrayed me, I never would have walked into this cafe alone. I never would have met them, and I never would have learned what actually matters. So congratulations, you played yourselves." And we walked out. I was shaking a little in the car afterward, but inside I felt lighter than I had in years. Like that encounter had finally snapped the last thread tying me to that old version of myself. Not long after that, sitting on Simone's couch with Destiny half asleep against my side, and some kids' movie playing in the background. Simone looked at me and said, "You have become important to us, Adrian, but I need you to be sure, because if you change your mind and walk away, destiny will be crushed, and so will I." And I told her without hesitation, "I am all in more sure about this than anything I have ever done." And I meant it so much it scared me more than any deal I had ever signed. I asked Destiny's permission to be her dad, told her about honoring her first father's memory, and we went through the adoption process standing in a courthouse while a judge called her Destiny Bennett Cole and told her, "Congratulations to you and your parents." And she whispered to me, "You were already my dad, this just makes it official. And if that does not break and fix your heart at the same time, I do not know what will." 6 months after the day we met, I took them back to the Sunrise Café early on a Sunday. Except this time I had flowers on the table and a ring in my pocket. The owner had helped me reserve our original table, and when Simone walked in and saw it all, she said, "Adrian, what is going on?" And I told her the whole story from my side about the worst birthday of my life, about the email and the text, and the feeling of total emptiness, about how her daughter's small question had pulled me back from a cliff I did not even admit I was standing on. And then I got down on one knee, right there in that tiny cafe, and said, "Simone, you and Destiny gave me back my life. You gave me a home and a purpose and a family. I love you more than I have ever loved anyone. Will you marry me? Will you let me be your husband and Destiny's father for the rest of my life?" And Destiny jumped up with a sign she had made that said, "Will you marry my dad? Please say yes." Glitter everywhere. And Simone laughed and cried and said yes. And strangers clapped, and the owner brought out a cake with tiny fondant figures that looked suspiciously like us. And for the first time on my birthday, the candles actually meant something. Fast forward, and a lot of good hard work later, and you would find us back in that same cafe 1 year after the proposal, this time on my 43rd birthday, Simone sitting beside me with a round belly because we were expecting our first baby together, hand resting there, every time the kid kicked Destiny across from us, coloring, telling us about wanting to be a doctor or an engineer, depending on the day, the owner bringing our usual order without asking because she knew our Sundays by heart. And me looking around realizing my life was almost unrecognizable in the best possible way. The company was still there, but it was different. We had implemented real benefits, mental health support, childcare assistance, flexible hours. We had started the Cole Bennett Foundation for single parents, using a big chunk of my personal wealth to make sure other people like Simone did not have to choose between groceries and textbooks. And for the first time, I was proud of what my money was doing when I was not looking at it. I was cutting into my birthday cake, chocolate, of course, when I noticed a man in a suit, sitting alone near the window, staring at his phone, with that same hollow, lost expression I had worn 2 years earlier. And before I could say anything, Destiny followed my gaze and said, "Dad, that man looks sad like you did before. Should we ask him?" And I looked at Simone, and she just nodded, this little smile on her face like she already knew the answer. So we walked over together, Destiny holding a plate with a slice of cake, and she put it on his table and said, "Excuse me, sir, you look sad. Are you okay? Talking helps." And he looked up. Eyes red like he had not slept or had just been crying. And he glanced at me and Simone like he was trying to decide if this was a prank. And I held out my hand and said, "I am Adrian. This is my wife Simone and our daughter Destiny. 2 years ago, I was sitting exactly where you are, alone on my birthday, thinking my life was over, and this little one asked me the same question. It did not fix everything overnight, but it started something. If you want to talk, we would be happy to share our cake." And he stared at me for a second, and then something in his face crumpled, and he nodded. His name was Robert. He was a lawyer. His wife had just told him she wanted a divorce. His partners were pushing him out of the firm he helped build. His kids were distant, he said. I do not know who I am if I am not the guy at the office. And I told him I know exactly who that guy is. I was him. Success does not mean much if you have no one to share it with. And we sat there for almost an hour. Destiny chiming in with 8-year-old wisdom, Simone talking about being brave enough to start over, and me sharing as honestly as I could without turning it into a sermon. And before he left, I handed him my card and said, "If you ever need someone to talk to who will not bill you by the hour, call me." Someone asked if I was okay once, and it saved my life. I am just trying to pay that forward. And he looked at it and asked, "Why would you do that for a stranger?" And I just shrugged and said, "Because I stopped believing in strangers the day a 7-year-old chose to see me instead of walking past." So here is where I leave it with you. If you have stayed with me this far, listening to a billionaire talk about birthday cakes and custody papers and scholarships, I want to ask you something straight. If you were Simone, would you have taken the money when a man like me offered to cover your rent and your school? Or would pride have kept you struggling longer? And if you were in my shoes, would you risk opening your door, your wallet, your heart to a single mom and her kid, knowing everyone would call it a savior complex or a power imbalance? Because I hear that sometimes, and I get it. Was I wrong to use my money this way, to pay off her car repairs, her tuition, to set up a trust for destiny? Or is that exactly what money is supposed to be, for when you finally realize it is not going to hug you when you are dying? You know what I mean? Do you think people like Trevor and Rebecca are just villains? Or do you think they are as lost as I was, chasing something that will never fill them up? And most importantly, do you believe a small act of kindness, one simple question thrown at the right moment, can really change the entire course of a life the way Destiny's did for me? Tell me in the comments if you think I did the right thing, if you think I crossed lines. If you have ever been the person sitting alone hoping someone would notice, or the one brave enough to walk up and say, "Are you okay?" And if this story hit something in you, go ahead and subscribe and share it. But more than that, tomorrow, when you see someone who looks like they are barely hanging on, I hope you hear a little girl's voice in your head and find the courage to ask that same question, because you honestly have no idea whose life you might be stepping into.